So what we're talking about today is how to use and read scale weight. Scale weight is obviously something within any body transformation process that a lot of us are going to use. It gives us a really good day-to-day measure of what's going on and how the protocol that we're using is actually working, but it is also one of the most volatile and frustrating numbers to look at on a day-to-day or at least a few times per week basis, right? And the reason it's important is because it's not that it is a necessity, but it is very important and a really good tool to use. But given how frustrating it can be, it's a very slippery slope if you don't know how to read it. And it is one of the reasons that a lot of people will give up something that's objectively working really well because they're seeing numbers that they don't like. But what the real issue is they don't know how to interpret that number and what's actually going on. So what we'll cover in this presentation is why we take it, how to use it, what could possibly affect those numbers, and then how to make decisions based on the numbers that are coming out and the experiences and the things that are coming up when you are reading the scale in that goal of long-term body composition change. So first thing we want to dive into is why do we actually track body weight? Now, you hear the phrase a lot that that's not the scale that I'm concerned with, it's how I look and how I feel, which is 100% true. And at the end of the day, right, if you had your perfect physique or perfect body and you built that over time, you would not care what the scale says. If you had a phenomenal physique at say 80 kilos, but you had a completely different physique that you were unhappy with at 60 kilos, you would take the 80 kilo physique every single day if that's the one that you were more happy with. So scale weight does not give the full picture. With that being said, it is probably one of the only measurements that we can use that gives us that day-to-day, week-to-week look at how the protocol, specifically nutrition and activity, is working to change your body composition, whether it's a fat loss phase, which will probably direct most of the conversation around today, whether it's just maintaining your body weight, or whether it's actually going into some sort of growing phase. Now, like I mentioned just before, it's the look of our body that we're really concerned about, right? But put it this way, if you go down that route of trying to monitor your progress based on progress pics, and you're taking a progress pic every single week to see changes in your body and how it's actually working, it's going to be very, very hard to tell or make decisions based off what you're seeing in front of you, because week to week progress pics show very little change, if any, right? But if you saw a drop of 500 grams on the scale, that would be considered a really good drop on the scale on a fat loss phase. But there's just no way you're going to see that in progress pic from week 1 to week 2. So that's why having that scale weight reading a few times per week, probably at a minimum 3 to 4, is really important, so we can actually see what is going on underneath everything in regards to our protocol. Now, obviously the other path that we can go down to measure body composition, which is a semi-common one, like it says here, is the DEXA scan. But again, that's not something that, one, from an affordability perspective and just a functionality perspective or practicality, that you're going to be able to do every single week. And even so, it's probably not going to show that much visual change that you can then go for and make decisions based on how your protocol is working. So the most practical way to be able to come in and make a week by week decision on what you need to do with your nutrition, with your activity, with your training, is taking a body weight reading. Now, the issue is that when you take your body weight, it is not a direct measure of fat mass change. It is just weighing everything within your body, right? And this is where things get a little bit complicated. As you can see down here, it obviously measures fat mass, but within our body, we also have daily shifts in the amount of water our body holds through water retention. We have food that's in transit, so food that might still be digesting. We have obviously our muscle tissue. We have glycogen stored within the muscle, within the body, that also drags water in. Waste, so just food volume caught up that's still in our system. We have inflammation, which is just like a swelling effect that occurs through processes like recovery and healing. And then literally everything else within your body. We have our blood, bones, everything else that is within our body. That is what the scale weight is reading, right? And based on this, there are things that can move up and down on a day-to-day basis, irrespective of body fat change and irrespective of how well you're actually sticking to your protocol. So this is where things get a little bit tricky, and you have to have almost a bit of an external view of everything that's going on in the lead up to that measurement to determine, is this an accurate reading of what's going on? So the first thing you need to do to make sure this reading is as accurate as possible is have a standardized way that you actually take your body weight. So as you can see here, I've broken it down into 4 relatively simple steps. Now, these do seem rigid, but you would be surprised and I'll go through some examples within this, how scale weight can change from the most minor changes with how you actually take it. So number one, same scale, same spot that you measure every single day. Scales are calibrated differently. Now, I've had examples of people going, oh, I got this new scale and it's a kilo different, and I think this is the more accurate one. It doesn't matter how accurate your scale is. You actually wouldn't really know which is the right one, as long as you use the exact same scale each time and it's calibrated the same way. So let's say you take a body weight on an old scale and it's 61 kilos, and you take a body weight on a newer scale that you got and it's 60 kilos, right? It doesn't matter as long as you don't jump back and forth between the two. If that old scale goes from 61 to 60 and that a new scale goes from 60 to 59, either way, you've lost a kilo. And at the end of the day, like we said, the number doesn't necessarily matter. We just want to see that fat loss is occurring to some degree. Now, the same spot, again, I've had examples of this where people will move their scale from one point in their bathroom to another room, and it shows a completely different number. So just to take all of that out of the equation, put your scale, the same scale, each time you take body weight in the same spot, measure it there just for accuracy, because things can get a little bit thrown out. I know it sounds pedantic, but given that scale weight is such a frustrating thing to measure, it's better that you just keep everything tight, right? Same time, first thing in the morning upon waking, after you've gone to the bathroom. Again, obviously after the bathroom as best you can, but first thing in the morning when you wake up, get into a really nice routine with it. Now, the first thing in the morning is important too. Why that's important? You don't want to be taking scale weight mid-afternoon after you've had half a day worth of eating, right, and everything else that comes with that. And just the timing of the day. So for me, I know that even if I do take it in the morning, my body weights are actually higher very early in the morning compared to if I sleep in a bit more on the weekend. So trying to take them at roughly the same time each day is super important. And again, you're trying to do it in the morning before you've actually got into your day. And then same clothing with and minimal clothing or none, right? So hopefully, I know some people weigh themselves at the gym, but if you can do it at home in the least amount of clothing possible, it's going to give you the most accurate measure, because again, you might wear a different set of shoes, a different jumper, it might be summer, it might be winter, you have more clothes on in the winter. It's going to reflect differently depending on what kind of clothes you actually have on your body. So that's how you want to weigh in every single time to just get the most accurate measure to begin with. Now, when we actually go to reading scale weight over time, you can see by this graph, and there's a whole heap of different patterns that come up within scale weight when you map it over time. I've seen people that drop pretty consistently just straight down if we get the nutrition in the right place. I've seen people that will make a big drop, hold for a while, and then have another big drop. I've seen people that are just up and down all the time. But what we want to see is the trend moving down the whole time in relation to the fluctuations that are happening, right? And what we've got to kind of connect here is why these fluctuations might be occurring. You can see some examples starting to get hinted at here. And if we can work our way through these and get into a place where mentally we're okay to deal with them and it doesn't throw us off track, we will see that trend down over time. But like I said, it's coming in and learning, how do we actually read and respond to these fluctuations without allowing them to think, oh, everything's messed up, this doesn't work for me anymore, what's the point of even trying? So the first thing is to trust your lowest lows. What do I mean by this? So basically within your body, right, there's going to be a set amount of mass that you kind of hold. And what I'm specifically talking, obviously your bone's not going to change. Your muscle mass changes very, very slowly. So you don't really take that into account over short periods of time, especially a week. You're not going to put on a kilo of muscle in a week, trust me. But what does change very, very rapidly is water retention, inflammation, and food volume just sitting in your body, right? Now, with your lowest lows, unless you're dehydrated, you're not going to have less water in your body than it naturally kind of sits. You're not going to have less inflammation in your body than where it naturally kind of sits. And you're not going to have less food volume sitting in your body than it naturally kind of sits, right? And so when we get lows, they are showing true fat loss because they're not affected by other things coming into the equation, right? But when we get quick fluctuations, whether that's 100 grams, whether that's 500 grams, whether that's a kilo, whether that's 2 kilos overnight, there is no scenario where you are gaining 200 grams of fat overnight. There's no scenario where you're gaining half a kilo of fat overnight. There's no scenario where you're gaining 1.5 kilos of fat overnight. To actually put on a good amount of fat mass, you need to be in a chronic calorie surplus. And by I mean chronic, I mean consistently over a long period of time. It doesn't happen overnight, especially if you've been following, say, a nutrition target or a meal plan that's been causing drops this whole time, and then all of a sudden it jumps up and spikes. So your lowest lows are a really good indication of where fat loss is actually occurring. And why this is important is because basically fat loss can be happening even if your body weight spikes up. So if you're, let's give you a really common example in women. When you get your period, water retention happens, body weight spikes up, but you're still following along with your nutrition really well. Just because body weight is up by 1.5 kilos across those, I guess, 3 days to a week, it doesn't mean that fat loss isn't happening in the background. So when you come out the back end of your period and that water retention drops, you will start to see new lows pop through, and you can tell fat loss is actually happening. If I just swing back to this side with some other examples here, weekends is a really another common place where we get these fluctuations. Now, even if you stick to your calories, generally people are going to fluctuate up a little bit across the weekend just because they change their food. They might eat out, they might have bigger volumes of food at dinner time. The meals might be a little bit saltier, they might be a little bit carb heavy. Even if you're sticking to calorie targets really well, or just in general across the week, your nutrition's really good and you're not really going off plan, what will happen is that as you come into Sunday, Monday, you get those weigh-ins, body weight will fluctuate up again. But again, does not mean fat loss is not happening in the background. And now what you need to be doing is just going, and what generally happens as you come into the week, people lock back into their like day-to-day eating. Usually during a work week, everything's pretty repetitive. There's not too much going on. You're not going out to eat much. And what you'll see happening is fat loss is always occurring here, right? The water retention or the inflammation or the undigested food volume that might be masking it actually settles itself down throughout the week. So when you get to like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you start to see new lows pop through. And then the weekend happens again and it comes back up and then it goes back down. But what you consistently see over time is that through that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you see new lows pop out, and then each Monday's fluctuation gets lower and lower. That is a very, very typical pattern of fat loss and body weight trends for people that socialize on the weekend. It goes down during the week, pops up a bit, goes down during the week again, but every single time the lows get lower, the peaks get lower as well, but the average is going down over time as well. And this is kind of explained in this slide here, but like I said, what we want to be looking at is our averages over time, not single body weights. And this is why it's really important with your body weights as well. You're not just taking single body weights each week, especially on Mondays. A lot of people just take a Monday body weight to assess how their fat loss is going, when that is literally probably the time where it's going to be at its highest. So let's say, for example, you get yourself into a deficit and you start at 65 kilos on the Monday, right? But you don't take another body weight till the next Monday. You could be dropping that entire week. So you come down to 64 kilos by Friday, right? Then you have a couple of meals out on the weekend, but you still maintain your deficit. But because the meals, let's say one was an Asian meal, one was a fish and chips, high in sodium, your body weight pops up to 64.5 on Monday, right? So it's actually a little bit higher than what you originally started at, or somewhere close to. I can't remember what I said at the start. And you're like, okay, it's not working. What's going on? Nothing is happening. I may as well give up on this. Like this is not going to work for me, right? But what you missed was that big drastic drop throughout the middle of the week. So just by getting back to what you normally would do, you would probably see another new low pop out. And this is why it's important to take multiple body weights per week, not just that one on the Monday, and then make sure that we're looking at averages across time as well, not just single body weights across time. And then what you want to do, like I said, kind of alluded to earlier, it says here, you want to pick up these patterns. So specifically for women, obviously around your cycle, it's good for you to kind of pick up, okay, I know that my body weight increases by roughly half a kilo, 2 kilos in and around my cycle. And so when this does happen, is it frustrating? 100%. But I know if I just keep doing what I do to the best of my ability, it will come down over time. Okay, I know that I do socialize a bit on the weekends, and that is okay. You can still lose body fat and socialize and maintain your social life, right? But just be aware that your body weight probably will spike up a little bit Monday, and that is not that you've undone everything across the weekend. It's just that you are holding some fluid, holding some inflammation, holding some undigested food that will settle itself back down across the week. And trust me, obviously I'm a coach. Every single Monday I'm coming in to do check-ins. A lot of it is talking people down. You're chill, you're okay. You just keep sticking to what you're doing. You'll hit new lows by the end of the week, and it happens all the time. And this is a really good point to get you out of that black and white mindset, because people really do feel like weekends are their undoing, and they feel like they're stuck between either maintaining a social life or achieving their physique-based goals, and they don't think they can have both. Is there an element of sacrifice that has to come in? Yeah, but you don't have to turn into a hermit to clear this, right? And it's just about understanding weight fluctuations and not letting it throw you off course. Now, this is something that I touched on earlier, but this is kind of like the pillar that lies underneath everything, right, with how does fat gain actually work, because it is really difficult to gain fat overnight. And if you were going to put on any significant amount of fat overnight, I'm talking like literally 200 grams, you would have to eat an incredible amount of food. The body just doesn't work like that. And when I mean an incredible amount of food, I'm talking more than you could possibly imagine. So when you see your body weight jump up by 300 grams, 200 grams, a kilo, it's nothing that won't resolve itself within the next few days just by you either getting back to the way that you were previously eating or just following with what you are currently doing. A lot of this stuff you have no control over. And in this next slide, which I'll go to now, you can see all the different things as to why your body weight might jump up. And if you're going through this, right, you could pick probably multiple of these that happen to you on a day-to-day basis. And this is where, again, like I said at the very start of this presentation, people will give up on something that's objectively working really well for a body weight reading that has nothing to do with how they're actually implementing and nothing to do with any sort of fat gain. And fat gain can still be, fat loss can still be happening in the background. So if you think about this, right, a saltier meal can very quickly drag water into the body and push your body weight up. A bigger meal eaten later in the day will just mean it's not fully digested when you wake up and take that body weight. You've had some sort of food that's reacted within your body, whether it's intolerance, whether it's an allergic reaction. People that try to eat gluten-free, if they eat something that had some gluten in it that they didn't know about, they are going to react to that the next day and it's going to be reflected in their body weight. Period, illness, any sort of stress can cause water retention and inflammation within the body. Travel, just as a rule of thumb, every time you travel, you're probably going to be holding some water. Training induces, it's a stress on the body. We've got to remember that all stress, the body just responds to all stress the exact same, whether it's a good stress or it's a bad stress, right? Training is obviously a good stress, but in that recovery and stress response process, you are going to experience some inflammation, water retention. Poor sleep, whether that's quality of sleep or whether that's the length of your sleep, will drive body weight up. Like I said, taking body weight earlier in the morning can actually mean you have an increased reading. And then digestive issues, if you haven't been to the bathroom in a couple of days, clearly that's going to drive your body weight up. So based off all that, what we want to take away from this, right, is a few key things. One, fat loss can be happening in the background even when scale weight fluctuates up and down. And if it does fluctuate up, it is highly, highly unlikely that it has anything to do with any increase in fat mass. I'm 99% sure that it has nothing to do with fat gain. If you are gaining fat, you will see that gradually creep up over time. It won't go through these new lows and everything like that comes through. If you want to pick out your patterns, if you are seeing new lows pop out each week, that is a good sign that you're in a deficit. You've just got to deal with those fluctuations. When you do have fluctuations, try to pin it back to something that could be happening in the previous day or two that could have contributed to that. Was it that you just was a bit more social on the weekend and just by getting back on track, it'll drift back down? Did you just get your period? Any of those things can come into play. And as soon as you can step on the scale and be super neutral about the number that you see, or at least when you see a number that you're not super happy with, take a breath, step back and rationalize with what it might be, and then just continue on with the plan. You'll be absolutely fine. The place where this goes wrong is if you see that number and you just completely throw in the towel. Because trust me, you are probably literally 1 to 2 days of that coming straight back down. As quickly as it can jump up, you can just as quickly lose it just by getting back to normality. And if you can manage your, I guess, reaction and emotions to body weight across the process of a fat loss phase, and you're in a deficit and everything's ticking along really nicely, you will crush and you will get a really good result.